Kia ora koutou. Ko Julian Kohn. Taku ingo. My whakapapa, for those of you who understand a little bit about my relationship with the whenua here, is through my stepmother, Hene Kohn, tātou o Te Wairoa, and Ngāti Porou ultimately. So I have been a forester, or in the old days they called us forest rangers in this district since 1979, largely in forest management, forest consulting, and a little bit working overseas and so on. So I do claim to have some understanding of what's happening in the forest industry in the past. Just give you a little bit of history about what forestry was like. And when I came along, the first plantings in the region were down Railway Road in Whareras in 1959, which was the year I was born. Those plantings, along with the Mangatu plantings, were basically there to encourage forest establishment on erosion-prone land, as well as small production forests. And of course, over time, that expanded up into the coast, where in the 80s, a lot of the plantings up there was what I describe as a social experiment to try and bring whānau back home from the cities. And when I was a forest ranger working up at Tokomaru Bay, we had a workforce of about 70 or 80 young guys, essentially. There were no women in those gangs in those days coming home from the city. So it worked extremely well. A lot of those people are still there now. And of course, over time, the government actions changed the approach to forestry, in that they decided that we had this great resource of timber. What are we going to do about it? We haven't got any money to invest in it, so we need to encourage overseas investors. And so that's resulted in a lot of sale of forests around the country, a lot of what we call crown forest leases, where a foreign company would come in and they would lease the land effectively off the government, so they would have the right to harvest the forest for a period of time. They pay a lease on the land. And of course, in the late 80s, there was a boom in private forest investment all around the country, with the likes of Roger Dickey and Forest Enterprises and Pine Farm Investments here. So the mums and dads of New Zealand decided forestry was a good investment, so they invested in forestry, along with a lot of farmers. So that became a change fundamentally in what happened in the industry. And of course, iwi were becoming stronger at that time as well. So through iwi settlements and their ability to acquire European freehold land and to get their traditional iwi land back, they were able to acquire forests as well. And they've become a real force in the forest industry up until now. And then, of course, more recently, as we all understand, the carbon forestry has become a big thing in New Zealand, where we have very significant carbon forests all around the country now, and of course, not least up on the east coast. So that gives you a little bit of background about the industry. Obviously relies on our whenua to create a timber resource. We sell that timber resource either to domestic and to overseas sources. The vast majority of it from Gisborne region goes over the port. Before the COVID crisis struck, we were exporting just over 4 million tonnes annually out of the Gisborne region, and that was more or less a sustainable level. Like, we could maintain that for probably a 10 to 15 year period. We had a slight decline in volumes. As a result of COVID, of course, the Chinese market's gone a bit whoopsie, and at the moment we are now harvesting about 2.5 million tonnes. And of course, the environmental situation with the cyclones and so on has resulted in a further reduction of those sort of volumes. So the climatic situation has obviously affected our industry very significantly, not only from an economic point of view, but from an environmental point of view. You know, quite honestly, our social licence has sort of almost been eradicated as a result of what's happened downstream and outside the gates of our forests. So we've been working very hard to try and improve that, and we have a process in place and have had for some time to try and get that back. But as you'd understand, it's a long, slow grind from our point of view, and we need to demonstrate that we are trying to do the right thing by way of the community. So the perception that, or the understanding and the goals of what the Eastland Wood Council is doing. And I must say that I'm talking on behalf of the Eastland Wood Council. I'm the current chair of the Eastland Wood Council, and I was asked to take up the role for 6 months after trying to retire for 4 years. I seem to get roped back into these things. But anyway, so for the last 6 months, I've been in this position, and we have deliberate strategies in place where we are trying to improve that social licence. But out in the forest, we're doing quite a number of things, and have been for some years, around operational improvements and what we're doing. You know, we're improving our roading, we're improving our skidding, we're pulling back more slash, we're burning slash, we're chipping slash, we're cleaning out waterways where it's appropriate, and doing all sorts of other environmental planning, which we hope and will improve what happens inside the gate. So as a result, what you see outside the gate gradually improves. But don't be fooled, it is a long, slow grind, and it's certainly not going to happen overnight, because forestry has a cycle of 25 or 30 years, and you can imagine that if we have a 5-year-old stand of trees at the moment, in order for us to be able to get them to the point where we can do something with them other than just leave them, which is not always desirable when you have things what we call mid-slope failure, where you have 10 or 15-year-old trees which they're just standing there growing, all of a sudden slip into the gully. What do you do about that? I can talk more about detail a bit later on in the groups, if you like, about what we are actually doing operationally, environmentally, and socially, that sort of thing. So I'll leave that to you to ask me those questions, and we can talk about that when we get a bit closer to the time. Is that me? Okay. Thank you.